The snow wasn't even white anymore. It was ash gray, stained with soot, piss, and blood, and you learned real quick not to eat it. You were 17 when they handed you the uniform, and it felt more like a costume than armor, too big in the shoulders, itchy at the neck, and heavy with some kind of future you didn't understand. You didn't enlist because you hated anyone. You enlisted because your father told you to. Or maybe because the teacher pointed at the Reich map and said the fatherland needed strong sons. Maybe because your friends did. It felt like a game at first. Boots polished, chin up, learning how to march like some kind of theater performance with rifles. The real war, the one that bites, didn't come until the train rolled east, screeching into Poland and then deeper, into a land that swallowed you whole. The cold hit first. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, but the kind that turns your piss to steam the moment it leaves your body and makes your toes go black inside stiff leather. Frost formed inside your helmet. Your breath hung like a ghost in front of your face. The Russians didn't stop coming, even when the thermometer snapped at -40. You slept in bombed-out huts, burrowed into trenches filled with rats the size of cats. You smelled like diesel and rot and wet wool, and it never went away. You carried a rifle, a few clips, and a mess tin that rarely held anything more than black bread and soup that tasted like boiled sock. And still, day after day, you were told to advance. Your commander barked orders like a dog trained on blood, his eyes always twitching, fingers trembling just a little from the cold or the memories. You didn't ask. No one did. You just followed. That's what we were good at, following. We followed into towns where the windows stared empty and children looked at you like ghosts, like monsters. You couldn't tell if they were scared of you or what they knew you'd become. The mud in Russia was unlike anything back home. It sucked at your boots like hands trying to drag you down. Your gear weighed 30 kilos, and after the first mile it felt like a coffin strapped to your back. The barrel of your rifle got so cold it stuck to your skin if you weren't careful. Some men pissed themselves just for warmth. There was a day, maybe outside Kursk, maybe further north. You saw a man's face ripped in half by shrapnel. 1 second he was shouting. The next he was on his knees with his jaw dangling by a thread of sinew. You didn't cry. You didn't even flinch. You stepped over him and kept moving because you had to. The fear came at night. That's when the howling started. Shells, mortars, screams from the dark that sounded like they came from the earth itself. You learned to sleep in bursts, one eye open, finger resting on the trigger. The lice never left. They crawled in your seams, in your hair, even in the cracks between your fingers. Your skin was always raw from scratching, and the medics had nothing, just chalk dust and gauze that smelled like mold. They didn't tell you what it meant, really. To take a village. To push a line. To dig in and hold ground that was soaked with the blood of people you didn't hate and didn't know. You saw women cradling their dead in ditches. You saw men strung up by piano wire in barns that stank of gasoline. You tried not to look, but you looked. We all did. You kept telling yourself you were just a soldier. Just a boy doing what he was told. But there's no such thing as innocence out there. Every bullet you fired had a face, even if you didn't see it. Every house you torched had laughter once. Had a table. Had children. The guilt comes later, years later, when you're lying in bed and you hear a sound that reminds you of tank tracks over frozen earth, and suddenly you're back there, your body shivering even under summer blankets. The Eastern Front was hell, but coming home was worse in its own way. You expected parades, handshakes, maybe even a little respect. Instead you got silence. Stares. A mother who looked older than you remembered. A country in ruins, too ashamed to look you in the eye. You couldn't talk about it, what you saw, what you did, how you stopped feeling things after the winter of 42, how you started to enjoy the sound your rifle made when it cracked, how you stole a pair of boots from a dying comrade because yours were frozen solid, how you shot a dog once because it barked and you thought it was a Russian. You never told anyone that part. You never will. They trained us to be machines, then left us to rust. No therapy. No closure. Just medals you kept in a drawer under your socks. You couldn't sleep unless the radio was on. You couldn't eat unless you smelled diesel in the air. Relationships? Forget it. You didn't know how to be touched anymore. You flinched when someone knocked at the door. You walked like you were still avoiding landmines. You talked like you were waiting for someone to give an order. And when people asked what it was like, you just said, it was cold. But the truth? The truth is it stripped you of your soul, inch by inch. The truth is you stopped being human out there and started being something else. Something you don't have a word for. You weren't fighting for freedom. You weren't defending home. You were caught in a storm of iron and ideology and blood, and every time you blinked, the world looked a little more like a nightmare. You tried to hold onto your name, your memories, the way your sister laughed, or the taste of your mother's soup, but even that faded. Out there, you were just a number, a body in a field, a statistic marching toward death in a war that never really had a victor, just survivors with broken minds and frostbitten feet. And maybe that's the worst part, that you lived.